So the Tank Museum has just reopened after being closed for a few months due to coronavirus, and I'm interested to see not just what's new there this time, but also how they've changed it to make it safe to visit again. So before you even get out of the car park, it's apparent there's now a new one-way system in place, and there's also stickers on the floor reminding you to observe social distancing at all times. On the wall outside, there's a big green reassuring tick mark from Visit England saying we're good to go. That basically means the museum has taken various measures to prevent or limit the spread of coronavirus, such as these boxes on the floor where you buy your tickets to make sure that people don't get too close, and there's various regular cleaning going on throughout the day too. The one-way system carries on throughout the entire museum, so you first go this way, where some German machine gunners will remind you to observe social distancing at all times. Then if you follow the one-way system, you will end up seeing every tank in here. You can, of course, dart off to the sides to have a closer look at the things if you want. There's only really two exceptions, and that is that you can't go inside the Mark 9 personnel carrier currently, presumably because people would use those hand railings otherwise. And similarly with the Mark 5 Star tank, both of the entrances on that are sealed off because there's going to be so many things inside there you could possibly touch. It's going to be impractical to keep it regularly cleaned. There are hand sanitizer stations dotted throughout the site for customers to use now. There's some kind of foamy stuff that comes out of them. I don't know what it was, but presumably it's good for killing coronavirus. These little things for the kids to play on were roped off as well. However, you can still poke your head through these holes to get your photo taken. As you enter the new World War II hall, you're greeted with another hand sanitizer dispenser and a reminder that there's a one-way system in force here as well. It's quite spacious though. If you want to stop and take some photos of tanks, there's plenty of room to do so while other people can pass you safely. This Anderson shelter was roped off, presumably because you don't really want anyone in a confined space with coronavirus. But otherwise, it's a fairly accessible day out still. You can see and access all of the tanks as before. All of the people I did bump into were fairly respectful of social distancing regulations, as indeed were the staff. The staff were fantastic actually. Some entrances and exits are roped off like that to maintain the one-way system, and some of the games, the new interactive games and things, are taped off so you can't use them, and this little wire game is also you don't have the little things you can use on them there. But yeah, I was quite pleased. It's nice to see some of the existing tanks laid out differently in a more accessible way, better theming. That SDKF Z251 used to be Panzer Grey the last time I saw it in here, I think. There's a little viewing area up here, so you can have a look down on some of the tanks, enjoy a slightly different view. Just have to be careful that there's not already someone up there when you got there, but fear naught. Here's a nice new game. It looks very, very shiny and new, presumably because no one's had an opportunity to play it yet, because that's also roped off. And then I thought this was a seating area that was roped off at first, but as I came around to have a closer look, I realised it was actually meant to be a landing craft, so it's presumably for the kids to play in. So now we're into the Normandy section. It's quite nice to see the King Tiger displayed like that with the Lukes next to it. You got the little Goliath there on the table. Must be a fairly strong table. But yeah, it's nice to see how things have been grouped together in themes now. It seems much more logical. There are some interactive components still around here though. For example, here you're invited to press a button to select a topic for the video. I didn't press any of these things, however I did see the staff wandering around cleaning stuff like that all the time, so I'm sure it'll be fine. There's the new paintwork for the Jagd Panther on the right there, incidentally. And this little section between the tanks was roped off because it's a long bottleneck, which people can't really pass each other safely on. It's interesting how this hall wasn't really designed with a one-way system in mind, however they've clearly managed to retrofit one fairly effectively, I'd say. This fine example of the Stug 3 is roped off not to protect it from coronavirus, but just because it's got some pointy bits on it that they don't want people to walk into. And again, this part is just roped off simply because it's hard to implement the one-way system otherwise. And there's also little signs around reminding you about the social distancing stuff. There is a spurious apostrophe on there if you look closely, however I'm sure the message gets across anyway. Then the one-way system takes you into the On the Record exhibition. I find it a bit too dark in here. I guess that's why the camera is struggling as well. What I find quite interesting from here is that when you come out, you're then viewing the big gun rack thing, which is against a brick wall. I don't think the position of that has ever changed. So when you look at old postcards of the museum, you can actually see where vehicles used to be in relation to where they are now. The children's play area was obviously shut. TOG 2 is still going strong, and also the World of Tanks computer game things were obviously closed off. Unfortunately, access to the gantry over the rear of the Chieftain was closed off too, presumably because people are going to use the handrails there. Some of the stuff in the Afghanistan area were roped off too, and the only place you can buy food there currently is at the cafe here. It's got a sensible queuing system, and they ask you to have only one person per household in the queue to keep the queue light, I guess. And then you can come out this way and you can actually access the rest of the World War II hall and see the guns up close. So here's the view from the other end of the World War II hall, and you can sort of see why they wouldn't really want anyone going up that narrow gap there in both directions. And then if we pan all the way around, we can see the massive Jagdtiger flanking this lot. Very impressive tank. That is clearly the guardian of the toilets. Toilets were interesting. In the gents at least, every other urinal is roped off, so people aren't going to get too close to each other. There's clear instructions on how to wash your hands, and there's paper towels which you can then dry your hands with and dispose of. However, that's no good if you then have to pull the door handle to get out of the toilets, which is why there's the hand sanitizer stations on the outside of the toilets as well. This one-way sign didn't really make much sense because it came from somewhere where you wouldn't be able to actually come from if you obeyed that barrier properly. But I had a look up here anyway just to see what's going on. Following the one-way system then takes you into the tank factory exhibition, where things like these interactive screens are turned off and all of the puzzle pieces for the CVRT family have been removed, so no one's going to be touching things unnecessarily there. It's quite amenable, this exhibition, to a one-way system, I thought, because it practically already was one, just without the signs. I thought it was curious that this thing where you can poke your head through and get your photo taken had been roped off, and I wondered if that's because it's got handles on it, whereas the ones in the World War I hall don't have handles. There's quite a lot of interactive things in this area though, so a lot of those are roped off. Basically all of the things in the metal cages there, I guess by virtue of them being in cages, they are quite easy to rope off. But in addition to those, the seats you can sit in to see what it's like to be in a tank, they're roped off as well. One thing I did notice, but not until afterwards, is that these little things in the cages are quite noisy usually, but without them running today, they were completely silent, which I hadn't noticed it until afterwards, but it made it really peaceful and enjoyable. And as you can see here, there's also plenty of room for people to pass you safely if you want to take some photos of things, or vice versa. And there's plenty of room on the lead up to the one-way system through the cut in half Centurion tank as well. When you leave the tank factory exhibition, it's apparent that you can't actually leave the museum by the way you came in. I guess that's to preserve the one-way system as best they can. So you either have to leave through the shop, which is a cunning move, or you can go down the ramp into a tank story hall where you can see things like a Centurion tank that hasn't been cut in half. Once you're down the bottom of the ramp, it's apparent that you're not allowed back up it, and there's sort of a one-way system down here, but there's not very much signage, but it's fairly open plan, so it's very easy to maintain social distancing. I was disappointed that this gantry was closed because they've replaced the T-34-85 with the Finnish T-34-76, which I've not seen from above, so that was a bit disappointing. But anyway, it's fairly quiet down here, lots of room to socially distance. You can't see any one-way markers from here, so I wasn't entirely sure which way I was meant to go. The Sherman Firefly would normally have some headphones here so you can listen to some audio. They've been removed, I guess, so there's no chance of infection. And this used to be a table for kids to play on. It had model soldiers and things on it. No thank you. And here's a screen that the staff were cleaning very regularly. The way out You have to go up the stairs there because you can't go back up the ramp. The top floor with the restaurant was closed, and if you can't use the stairs, you can use the lift, which is regularly disinfected. The gift shop also has some obvious infection prevention and control measures in place when you're paying for your goods, but because some of the shelves in there are quite close to each other, I thought it might be hard to maintain a full 2 meters of social distancing if it were to get a bit busy. However, to mitigate that, there's currently a daily limit of 500 visitors at the Tank Museum, and you have to book your ticket in advance as well. That, coupled with all of the other measures that the Tank Museum have implemented, I think it makes it a very, very safe place to visit. I certainly felt plenty safe in there. I think they've done an excellent job, and quite frankly, if you're into tanks as much as I am, now is the best time to visit, because not only are all of the tanks perfectly accessible, but it's nice and quiet too.